What happens when you build a successful company, sell it to a public corporation, and end up with absolutely nothing? This happened to Dick Costolo. Before he became the CEO of Twitter, he co-founded a startup called SpyInit. In September 2000, right on the edge of the dot-com bubble bursting, they sold the company to 724 Solutions, barred from touching their stock for an entire year. Over those 12 months, the internet bubble collapsed. By the time the lockup expired in September 2001, the stock's value had plummeted. The final payout was barely worth enough to keep them in Starbucks lattes for a year. Costolo's loss was built into the paperwork from day one, the direct result of a massive information asymmetry. Venture capitalists and their lawyers navigate complex financial mechanics every single day. First-time founders do not. Overcoming this gap is the entire premise of the manual Venture Deals. The authors outline how founders can decode this process and level the field. The core insight is that venture capital term sheets aren't arbitrary collections of legal jargon. They are highly structured systems built on two distinct pillars. Every clause in a term sheet boils down to either economics or control. Understanding this binary architecture allows a founder to navigate the negotiation and actually protect their life-changing payout. This diagram shows the economics column, beginning with the single metric founders obsess over most during negotiations, the valuation, or the price of their company. Fixating exclusively on this top-line number is a dangerous blind spot. VCs expect this, and they will gladly grant a high valuation, provided the founder concedes on the secondary economic clauses that actually dictate who gets paid. The liquidation preference acts as the primary adjustment to the actual payout. This clause guarantees exactly who gets paid first and how much when the company is eventually sold. A VC with a standard liquidation preference extracts their entire initial investment back before common shareholders, like the founders and employees, see a single cent. Next is the anti-dilution clause. If a company raises money later at a lower valuation, founders' ownership takes a hit. But anti-dilution provisions mathematically adjust the price the VC paid, protecting their ownership percentage. Because the VC slice of the pie stays the same while the total value shrinks, the founders are forced to absorb the entire financial loss. Then there is the matter of vesting and the employee option pool. VCs will typically require founders to carve out a massive block of unallocated shares for future employees before the deal closes. By baking this into the pre-money valuation, the dilution reduces only the founder's equity. The incoming VCs aren't diluted by it at all. VCs use these secondary terms to protect their downside and guarantee their returns, rendering a massive headline price entirely conditional on how the rest of the economics column is built. Securing a high valuation often comes at the direct expense of operational control. The primary mechanism of corporate control is the board of directors. It doesn't matter if you own the vast majority of the actual stock. The board dictates strategic direction, hiring, and firing. If you lose control of the board, you can be removed from the company you started. To ensure a board doesn't act against their interests, VCs install a safety net, protective provisions. These provisions grant the VC absolute veto power over major company decisions. Even as minority shareholders, they can block the company from taking on debt, changing the executive team, or selling the business. The drag-along agreement represents the most direct authority a VC can exert over a founder's exit. This is a specific legal mechanism that can force all shareholders, including the founders, to vote in favor of selling the company. If a VC uses a drag-along right alongside a liquidation preference, they can force an early, low-value exit to recoup their initial investment, completely against the founder's will, leaving the founder with a $0 payout. The control column is designed to ensure that even if you retain 80% of the equity, you might hold zero power over your company's ultimate fate. To negotiate effectively, you have to look at the table from the venture capitalist perspective and ask why they systematically demand these protections. VCs are not using their own money. They have their own demanding investors, known as limited partners or LPs. VCs operate under strict fiduciary duties to these limited partners. They are legally obligated to mitigate risk and maximize portfolio returns. This chart visualizes fund cash flow, specifically the reserves node. A venture fund must hold massive amounts of capital in reserve to fund their most successful companies in subsequent rounds. Locking this money away restricts a VC's flexibility with the rest of their portfolio. Add to this the ticking clock of a standard 10-year fund lifecycle. This timeline forces VCs to seek massive exits to return cash to their LPs. If a company stagnates, the fund pressure dictates shutting it down to focus on the winners. These exact internal constraints, time, reserves, and LP pressure, directly manifest as the economic and control terms found on the term sheet. VCs aren't demanding a drag-along right out of malice. They are operating within a rigid, high-pressure machine. When a founder understands these mechanics, they can anticipate VC behavior and negotiate rationally rather than emotionally. The negotiation of all these individual economic and control terms ultimately resolves into one final snapshot of ownership, the capitalization table. The cap table maps out exactly who owns what percentage of the company. Based on the liquidation preferences and option pools we discussed, it dictates exactly who gets paid what in various exit scenarios. All of this careful preparation points toward the ultimate defining goal of the entire venture capital cycle, the exit. This brings us to the letter of intent, or LOI. This is the document that dictates the final acquisition of the startup. The letter of intent uses the same architectural balance of economic and control terms as the initial startup term sheet. From escrow holdbacks to asset versus stock purchases, the logic remains identical, which brings us back to Dick Costolo. After the dot-com crash wiped out his first payout, he started another company called FeedBurner. This time, he understood the architecture of the deal. He successfully navigated multiple rounds of complex VC funding, managing the economics and maintaining operational control. When FeedBurner attracted acquisition interest in 2007, the company was purchased by Google. Because Costello knew how to structure his terms, he avoided the registration rights traps that destroyed his first exit. Mastering the architecture of the venture deal removes the informational asymmetry. It turns founders from victims of a complex legal machine into equals at the negotiating table.